about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Hello.
What is up, Denise Simon?
Hello, Mr. Don Neuen.
Hey, you know, it's been a long day at work. I have no idea what's happened in the world other than I see a bunch of red headlines on Drudge. But I've not even been able to take a look at them. I just see red. And when I see red on Drudge, I know Denise Simon's got a lot to talk about.
I don't know. I don't go to Drudge, but all right.
Well, I know you don't, but as a rule, if I see a lot of red on Drudge, Denise has stuff to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's Drive Time Situation Report. On one end of this conversation, you've got the great Denise Simon. She is about to educate us on what happened today that we all missed while we were working or dealing with our families or whatever we do, to where we're not able to watch the news, study the news, read documents, watch videos, watch hearings, whatever it is. Denise, that's what she does all day. So we are super grateful for that. Denise, let's timestamp it and get right after it.
Well, it's 8:58 p.m. Eastern on the 22nd day of July in the year of our Lord, 2019.
That was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It sounded like you were pensive while you were saying that.
Well, you know, for a couple of days now, I've been really almost beside myself. And I'll tell you why. I watched every single minute of the week's worth of the circus going on in Washington, D.C., leading up to the Kavanaugh hearings on his confirmation to the Supreme Court, during the hearings and after the hearings. And I've just not gotten over it. I just can't get over the wide, coordinated, choreographed operation that Democrats went through to stop that 1 nomination, 2 confirmation, and to 3 to destroy not only him, but the process. And I have the book titled Justice on Trial, the Kavanaugh Confirmation in the Future of the Supreme Court, authored by Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino. And of the, 300 plus pages, just at around 200. And what is particularly fascinating about this book so far is what we knew that was going on, that was reported to us, on whatever local TV or cable or whatever anybody was watching, was really only about 10 or 15% of really what was going on in the entire process. So I woke up this morning, because this thing is still haunting me. I'm like reliving the Kavanaugh process. And I woke up this morning saying to when my feet hit the floor, and I said, when we hear about something that's being reported in the New York Times, or we hear about something that's reported in the Washington Post, anything that those 2 newspapers do, or any of their acolytes on the news, like MSNBC and CNN, those activities aren't meant for us. Those reports are not meant for us. Those reports the news items are meant for other members of the media and politicians and those that used to be politicians that are outside of government but work within government. If you understand what I'm saying, these cockamamie things like the Center for American Progress or, any of those. So we mean nothing. We only mean something to politicians when they, one, need some money, two, they need some airtime, and three, they need a vote. Other than that, they don't care about us. None. Zero. And neither does the media. So let me ask this question to you, Don, just for fun, and to the listeners so they can kind of think about it themselves. When you look at something like the headlines on Drudge, or you look at the headlines on Fox, or you look at the headlines on really anything else, do these headlines ever really shock us anymore?
No.
Okay. Now,
No.
therein lies a problem.
Hold on. Nothing shocks us anymore. It's just amazing at how more appalling things get every day. And by the way, I want to give you a plug for your show on Thursday. You're going to have Molly and Carrie on this week's show on the Denise Simon Experience.
Yes. I gave them a choice of 24 minutes or 28 minutes, and they chose 28.
Good.
Yes. I will also tell you that I was really quite flattered when the interview was over and I was thanking them again and whatnot. Molly said to me, she said, during the interview, Denise, with the questions that you were asking, Carrie and I kept looking at each other, amazed at the quality of the questions, way beyond where any of the news outlets, including Fox, would ask. In other words, I really get it. And I'd only read at the time about 30 pages of the book. So I was really quite gratified and flattered by that.
Well, as you should be, because that's not the first time you've heard that. And you're not necessarily one that goes around tooting your own horn.
I
I'll
don't.
do it for you.
Well, thank you.
And you do prep for your interviews, and you do base your questions on the responses of your guests, not whatever your next question that you've written down may or may not be. You listen to your guests, and this is without a doubt not the first time that you've had high-profile guests that have actually come back and said, hey, thank you for asking the kind of questions we're never asked by the media.
Well, thank you for that. I understood the spirit of the book. Again, I only had like 30 pages into it. But here's the bigger deal, and this is what I want to impart. And it's actually one of the questions that I asked Molly and Carrie. Having lived through the Kavanaugh theater, and reading this book, it is really quite remarkable who was working for who, all of the staffers, all of the real silent heroes, and there were hundreds of them, Don, hundreds, that gave up vacations, that worked in the bowels of a government building with no air conditioning, with rats, because there are a lot of government buildings that have rats in them, that were combing news, doing questions. Interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but the Senate Judiciary, the Democrats, if you will, handed off 1,297 questions. 1,297 questions that they essentially gave Brett Kavanaugh about 50 hours to answer. And if they weren't answered, then everything would get delayed. And so it was stunning the number of people for free that wanted his confirmation, that stepped up to the game, and that are of legal minds, staffers, whether they were working for Grassley, whether they were working for those for any of the Supreme Court justices on the right side of the aisle, some those of the Department of Justice, they answered all of the questions, but what is in the right time frame. But what's even more remarkable, before the answers were delivered, Brett Kavanaugh read every answer to make sure that he had his fingerprints on it. He didn't want any other people to do the work. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it is.
Well, hey, you know what? All that does is cement the theory and the philosophy that you and I had the day after the 2016 election, which was simply this: the Democrats are going to do everything they can to throw sand into the gears of the Trump administration, no matter what it is, no matter how sickening normal, level-headed people are at the behavior of the Democrat Party. It doesn't matter. They have
this
zero integrity.
was one of the questions that I asked both Molly and Carrie, because reading the book Justice on Trial, not only just seeing it play out on TV, but then reading all the facts, and these are facts that people, Carrie and Molly were kind of forced to write this book because so many other people involved in this process had a story to tell. So this is really their story that they kind of collected. But what played out showed us the energy, the will, the money, the mobilizing of some nasty, nasty, nasty people out there that would do anything to, 1, stop a nomination, 2, stop a confirmation hearing, and 3, to destroy a man and his family, by the way. But what's fascinating, and I asked this question, because we have this Russian collusion Mueller investigation thing going on, we didn't realize the tactics that the Democrats played before the Kavanaugh hearings, because of the way it came to us. It came to us in little drips and drabbles, and we're still getting, we still don't have all the facts, even though the Mueller report is out. But if you read Justice on Trial, you begin to see the scope, the size of the nefarious, cunning work that the Democrats do. So I would say, I asked the question, your book is really a public service, because if you look at a bird's eye view of Justice on Trial and what they did at Kavanaugh, and apply what you've learned going backwards to the Trump resist movement, we'll begin to understand things a little bit better. And it's not the first time. So I opened up this segment with you by saying, are we ever shocked by the headlines that we see? And the answer, that's no. And that in itself is shameful. We ought to be, right now, Washington, D.C. ought to look like Puerto Rico, which, by the way, they say is 1 million people that are protesting that governor of Puerto Rico. Washington, D.C. should look like Puerto Rico. We should be saying to these Democrats, shame. And there has to be a word that means something more than shame by a factor of 100 times. I don't know what it is, but it is really kind of remarkable. If we kind of go backwards, we were somewhat shocked over the passage of Obamacare. You have to pass it so you'll know what's in it. We were shocked by Fast and Furious. We were shocked by Benghazi. We were shocked by the IRS targeting program. But now we're just, with all these other things, we're no longer shocked anymore. NSA, it's gone. And so I would argue.
Don't you think that is by design? That's a tactic of Saul Alinsky.
Well, I don't know that it.
Sadly,
I don't know that it is, because here's where I was going with that. The voters here in the United States, when they voted for Trump, or anybody other than Hillary, I would say, they were saying, we kind of fall into that drain the swamp thing. We just don't want this lawlessness anymore. You guys can keep up with the Benghazis and the IRS targeting and the NSA and all those kinds of things. We see it. We're over it. You can't shock us anymore, so we'll shock you. And when Hillary writes her book, What the Heck Happened? I guess that was the title of her book. she won't admit the answer. And the answer is, we can't stand it any longer. So this is what we voted for. We would have voted for, Casper the Friendly Ghost in order to not put Hillary in there. And those that voted for Hillary, I would say that they are deniers. Those that are voting that think they want to vote for Bernie Sanders, those that think they want to vote for Kirsten Gillibrand or Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or, any of the others, they're all deniers. Every one of them. And I would say those people need the education to understand this lawlessness, because they keep telling us nobody's above the law. We're not going to accept it anymore. So I think that we need to really look at things in a very different light here. And I would say that, Trump's agenda is kind of dead in the water, certainly until 2020. We're not going to get any immigration passed. We're not going to get any infrastructure passed. We're not going to get anything else done. Okay, we just need to admit that. When he is reelected, this cat really needs to go all out. I mean, completely all out and begin to drain this swamp. And I hope there's a war room for his second term. If there's a war room today, all the better. But there needs to be a war room for where he's going to be in his second term. I got to tell you.
What kind of actions do you see that need to be implemented? Because I totally agree with you, and I'm sure everybody that's listening to this show right now agrees with you. What kind of action, in order to drain that swamp, does Trump need to do in the last 4 years of his second term?
Well, he needs to begin to wield his trusty little pen and phone like Obama did and did often. And I'll give you a for instance. Now, during the Obama administration, there was in a Department of Homeland Security funding measure that the DHS/Customs and Border Patrol was mandated by law to do DNA testing of people coming across that border. And the DNA testing was handed off to a couple of companies that would do it pretty inexpensively, but the DNA results would go into several databases, and we could then track several things. One is, are they already in another database because of other existing DNA? Are they known criminals? Are they wanted someplace else in the world? Are all these kinds of things. I mean, just all kinds of reasons that we needed to collect this DNA. But what happened? Here comes Janet Napolitano at the end of her term, and she was like, nah, I don't think we really have the resources, but you know what? I'll go ahead and we'll just kind of concoct something here to fit this mandate that came into the budget funding for Department of Homeland Security. But it ended up a little bit later that Eric Holder and the Obama White House issued a waiver. We're not doing it. Everybody, essentially everybody, was to be DNA tested. And we're not doing it. Now,
no reason given, of course.
Well, yeah, they gave reasons. It's not resourced, it's cumbersome, blah, 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 blah. They can throw all kinds of reasons there, but nobody said, this is what we'll need to fix it. This is how we can do it. Or at least let's go for 20%. Those that are coming from, we can kind of tell they're questionable. You're not from Mexico. We can tell you're from, someplace in the Middle East, or you're from China, or you're from, you can kind of tell those things, and you can pretty well selectively, because of any kind of indicators that the Border Patrol has to administer these tests.
Yeah, but the Obama administration, there's no way in hell they're going to do that, because that would be profiling.
Well, they never use the word profiling, but here's the interesting thing. It's a crime process, because these people have already committed a crime by coming into the United States without permission. Okay? So what we're trying to
matter to Democrats.
But that's not the point. It's law. It's law already.
When is the last time law mattered to the Democrat Party?
Therein lies what I'm trying to say to you, because you got every single Democrat candidate, referring to Trump, that nobody is above the law. This president's not above the law. So we need to put it right back in their faces. And we're not doing that. Now let's go a step further, shall we? How many Democrats and Republicans did we hear about, a year ago, that all had these sexual harassment cases against their staffers or somebody else? And we found out about this cockamamie slush fund that the Congress had approved, that sat over there at Treasury, and we just made the taxpayer, pay off these people.
Exactly. And after Leslie Millwee, after Leslie Millwee and Juanita Broderick and a bunch of these folks, Kathleen Willey may have been there, after they went up to D.C. and tried to storm in these offices, it died. It died like the next day. It died before they got back home. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that's why my answer to you earlier was nothing is shocking. It's just more and more appalling every time.
Well, I guess
because inside the Beltway is not held to the same standards that Don Neuen and Denise Simon and all of our beloved listeners are held to.
And neither is government at an entity.
Correct.
Now it was kind of interesting, because I kind of knew where I wanted to go with you tonight on the show. And I happen to have Tucker Carlson on, and he opens up with the show talking about who's above the law. And, we're finding out that everybody's above the law, except for the little guy. And I'm thinking to myself, heck, Tucker, were you just sitting here in my office with me or what? Because he used the example of Kate Steinle. Well, Kate Steinle's family turned around, and after she died, they sued the city of San Francisco. Well, it was thrown out of court. Why was it thrown out of court? You remember?
Yeah, I do, but we've only got a minute, 13 seconds, and we've got to go to break.
Because you can't sue a sovereign government.
Right.
But illegals can.
Right.
So who's above the law?
Appalling. All right, hold that thought, Denise. Hang in there, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Drive Time SITREP with Denise Simon. My name is Don Neuen. On the break, I encourage you guys to go to her website, founderscode.com. The word founder, put an S, as in more than one founder. Founderscode, CODE.com. That's her personal website. You can follow all of her great work there. You can subscribe to her email mailing list and get each one of her articles sent directly to you when she completes them. And normally, that's on a daily basis, except for the weekends when she's hitting little yellow balls around on a tennis court down in the Tampa Clearwater area. You can also check out her show Thursday night. Some places airs it at 9 o'clock Eastern. Other places air it at 10 o'clock Eastern. But whatever station or network you're listening to this show on, you can catch the Denise Simon Experience on Thursday nights. The same thing you can do also with Cowboy Logic Radio. We hope that you'll check us out Tuesday nights, 9 or 10 p.m., depending on what station you're listening to it. We are so proud, ladies and gentlemen, to be part of the Mojo 50 family. Hopefully you're listening to us right now on mojo50.com. Ron Phillips and the whole crew there, we sure appreciate all the work you do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to allow somebody to pay their bills. We don't know who that is because it sure isn't us. And we'll be right back with more of the Drive Time SITREP.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
to the Drive Time SITREP. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Don Neuen. On the other end of this conversation, you've got the stellar Denise Simon. Denise, I was absolutely remiss at the beginning of this show to wish you Merry Christmas.
Well, Merry Christmas to you too.
I was focusing on driving and honing those skills. Right now, though, Denise, I am sitting on I-20. They have been doing construction. I'm headed west. They've been doing construction since before Memorial Day, and I am going 7 miles per hour.
I've done that before.
7 miles per hour. 7 miles per hour is so slow that you don't even need to say miles per hour. You just say, I'm going 7. How fast are you going? 7.
Mm-hmm. Been there, did it.
Yep. This totally sucks. You know, why do they shut down 2 lanes when they're doing construction work? Why don't they just shut down 1 lane and allow 2 to stay open? I'm coming to you as an Intel analyst to try to get that information from you.
OSHA, I guess.
OSHA? Is that what it is? Okay.
Sounds like it to me.
Whatever. All right, so let's get back to the Drive Time SITREP. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging in there after that 2-minute bottom of the hour break. Denise, where do you want to pick up where you were leaving off before we went to break?
Because Wednesday is supposed to be a banner day. Wednesday is the day that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is to testify before 2 committees. Now, I have been asked by several people what questions should be asked of Mueller. And I've produced, a dozen or so questions that I would ask. Some of them have been taken seriously. Some of them are kind of like, well, that might be a little on the frivolous side, but whatever. And my position earlier today was, it almost doesn't matter what Mueller says, because Mueller has already told us that whatever his testimony is going to stay within the 4 corners of the document.
That's right.
So
anything he doesn't want to answer, he's not going to answer.
So what to really listen for as this hearing happens is what the Democrats are going to ask, because the answer is in their question, and then what the Republicans are going to ask, because the answer is in their question. It's not the answer that matters, it's the question. Now, here's a fascinating thing that happened about 6:30 today, and that is the Department of Justice. It looks like it was, although I haven't read the letter yet, I was trying to get my hands on it. The Department of Justice has actually sent a letter over to Mueller and said, hey, dude, you are to stick with the 4 corners of the document in your testimony. You must stay within the boundaries of the public report. Okay. So, let's see. Does that mean now that we're going...
Then, first of all, why is he even testifying? Secondly, why is it going to be a banner day? See, I actually didn't think it was going to be a banner day.
Well...
I thought it was just going to be Wednesday.
As I said, it started off to be necessarily a banner day. Now it's not going to be, because he's going to stick with the 4 corners of the report. So
but we knew that.
The letter was written to Mueller. It was signed by Bradley Weinsheimer. That's a name from the Associate Deputy Attorney General. I have not heard his name before, but it is a 2-page letter, and so that's where we are. Now, I still think it's going to be somewhat of a banner day just by virtue of the style of the questions that are asked, because the Democrats are going to tell us where they're going to go with this whole process between now and Election Day in 2020.
Good point.
The Republicans are going to, I think, be extremely cautious because they don't want to reveal their entire hand, I would say, based on what work they are doing, like, for instance, Devin Nunes.
Right.
So they're going to be cautious about tipping their hand. They're going to keep things close to the vest, but they're going to ask pointed questions just to see where things go. So,
do you think that they will be able to ask the kind of questions that will damage the integrity of Mueller because he's not going to answer them? But the way they craft the question and frame the question, it's clear to anybody with a brain cell that Mueller's integrity needs to be taken into serious question.
Well, if you do all that, then it says that maybe his conclusion about no collusion is wrong, which is where Nadler is. So it's a very thin line that the Republicans have to go down because they could end up being on the same side as Nadler. And Nadler is saying essentially the Department of Justice and the Mueller report are meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very cautious line one has to go down here when it comes to the Republicans.
All right. Well, what are some of the questions you would ask?
One of the first ones I think I would ask is, when the initial letter came out by Rod Rosenstein assigning Robert Mueller as special counsel, we all got a copy of that. Now, essentially, we're told that there are 3 annexes or 3 iterations. And will we know what the final marching orders were for the Mueller team? That would be the first one. And I think that would have to be a careful one because what could end up happening? Well, we may... He's not going to probably answer that question, although he might. I have no idea. Again, it would be outside the scope of the Mueller report.
Well, hold on a second. We're going to find out how damn good you are, because by the time our beloved listeners are listening to this show, it will be Wednesday night. So we're going to find out how good Simon is. Simon says, let's see if she's that good.
The other one is, at what point did Mueller know that there was no collusion officially?
Bingo, that's a big one.
One of the biggest ones, however, that I would think I would want to know is, based on the time length of the Mueller investigation and what was determined with evidence and interviews and search warrants and all the rest. Did anybody from the Mueller team trot on back to the Department of Justice, or not through the Department of Justice, but go over to the FISA court and say, hey, you judges over here were hoodwinked? I want to know if those judges officially know that they were lied to.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a pretty good chance that if Mueller is not really careful, he could perjure himself, could he not?
Well,
especially given the fact that there are the findings of some other very important investigations that will be disclosed after his testimony.
You see, I'm of the notion that Mueller really was not the grand marshal of this parade. I'm of the notion that Mueller was just a guy that was holding a banner. The grand marshal of the parade was Weissman.
Correct.
And so, another question I would ask Mueller is, did you hire your entire team, including the lawyers, including selecting the FBI staff? Because I think he had a staff of 48 or 50 FBIers. And I think the answer to that's no. I think the answer is that Weissman hired everybody.
Well, why is Weissman not on the hot seat?
Well, therein lies yet another question. And see, here's a fascinating thing, and it might be because the Democrats are in the majority. How come the Republicans haven't sent a subpoena over to several other people that I would really like to hear from? You know? But I don't believe that they are allowed to have their own witnesses in the House side, but they could on the Senate side. But where are they? Well, my thought is the Senate side is saying, we're finished with this. We have to move on to very serious issues, and we're not going to resurrect this whole topic in the Senate. We're going to move on to immigration. We're going to move on to China. We're going to move on to trade. We're going to move on to Iran. We're going to move on to all these other things. And we're just finished with the Mueller operation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I agree with that to a certain extent. But at the same time, I find this pretty damn serious.
Well, I think a lot of eggs in the basket are surrounding the IG report.
Yep.
And
when are we supposed to see that?
September now.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if I moved at my business at the pace that DC moves, I wouldn't have a business.
Well, that's it. But that's the way government works. But I think a lot of weight is being put on the IG report and the investigation that Durham is doing. Durham is doing.
Yeah. That's going to be very interesting, don't you think?
Well, I almost believe that might be part and parcel of the reason that the Department of Justice sent the letter over to Mueller and said, hey, dude, you better stick with what we said with the four corners of the public report. Because my gut tells me, can't prove it, but my gut tells me that there's some things that have already surfaced that if Mueller would go outside the boundaries of the report and answer some questions, it may tip the cards that are being played by the AG, Barr and Durham and Horowitz and, anybody else.
Well, I also think, like I said earlier, that Mueller's got to walk a very fine line in potentially perjuring himself, because clearly he doesn't want to do that. He never would intentionally. But if he gets boxed into something, he could end up perjuring himself, especially if some interesting stuff comes out of Durham's findings.
At this point, I almost don't want Mueller to testify. We have to let the report stand on its own and let the Adam Schiffs and the Jerry Nadlers of the world scramble over there with, all the sheep and the goats. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just think it's a waste of time. Just like you said earlier, I think Wednesday is nothing more than Wednesday. Well, I really think it's going to be a nothing burger because he's going to effectively plead the fifth the entire day.
I'm very, very curious because I just know that between, Schiff and Nadler, that they're going to tip their hand, and I think that there's a lot to be gained from where they're necessarily going to go. Well,
we'll see. Again, by the time that this show airs on Wednesday night, this is going to be old news. Can I move you over to Iran?
Sure.
All right. Donna and I interviewed a lieutenant colonel retired from the U.S. Army this for tonight or tomorrow night's Tuesday night's Cowboy Logic show. He's Iranian born. And one of the things that we discussed in speaking about Iran and the current climate in that region is that the UK is really no friend of the United States. Now, I'm not going to regurgitate some of the things that we talked about because we don't have that much time left. but I would be very curious on your findings and your thoughts on that very broad statement that I just made.
I think the military component of Britain is, but I think the parliament is not.
Yep.
For the tanker to be seized and compounded over the weekend by the fast ropers of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps into itself was a travesty. Now, that tanker was being escorted by a British frigate, but the British frigate was 4 miles away. A lot of good an escort does. Now, the question then becomes, you would automatically think that a frigate would have at least 20 millimeter guns on them. But the captain of the frigate, listening to all of this, he's telling Iran, hey, don't do this. You're impeding, blah, 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 blah. The question is, great that you've got a frigate, but what it's really saying is that the rules of engagement, which is probably dictated to the British military or the British Navy by their parliament, is don't cause any problems. So the Navy wanted to do something, but the British parliament, they're just passive. So therein lies the problem. Now, where was the United States? We were right there. We were watching this whole thing, and we were listening to the whole thing. And because there's a British frigate, and because this was between the Brits and Iran, we could not get involved. But we heard it all. We watched it. Remember, we have drones. We have an awful lot of assets in the sky. We're listening to radio chatter. We knew everything that was happening. But the Brits are passive. They don't want to cause any trouble. So there's a conflict. The other piece is that the election is today, I believe, on the new prime minister because Theresa May had resigned. I think the new prime minister will be announced tomorrow. And is it going to be Boris Johnson or is it going to be somebody else? We don't know.
Well, timestamp the show again so that everybody understands why we don't know.
Well, again, this is Monday, the 22nd of July. So we will find out who the new prime minister is. And if it's Boris Johnson, we may stand a better chance than we did with Theresa May in having the Brits being better allies to us and where they're going to go with Brexit. But remember, too, Britain is in a very they're in a very bad place right now. They don't know who to be friends to because they are still part of the European Union, which also means they have to defer their laws, their court system, their rules of engagement back to the European courts. Everybody's in the same boat. So whatever Britain does would be the same thing that, France would have to do. It's the cockamamie socialist operation of the European court judiciary system they have to defer to. So they really can't stand on their own.
All right, let me ask you this question. Trump is clearly utilizing Twitter to get his message out, whether we like the verbiage that he uses or not. How much of what Trump is saying regarding Iran and the situation in that region right now do you find to be dead on balls accurate right? And how much is he bloviating? I would like to think no bloviating, and he most certainly knows so much more than the rest of us, and he's just not quite as tactful in releasing that information. But do you think what he's saying is accurate?
I don't read his Twitter feed, but when it comes to whatever he is saying regarding Iran, he's just shooting Scud missiles over into their direction. That's all he's really doing. The motivations for, sending those shots across the bow is what we really need to know about, and we don't know. But Iran lies. Iran lies as much as Moscow lies.
And what about the 17 CIA?
Okay, well let me tell you let me tell you about those guys. All right, they may have some kind of connective tissue to U.S. intelligence, but I'm of the notion that they don't work for U.S. intelligence. They were not all in Iran either, and that's kind of a misnomer. A lot of people think that, we've got all these operatives that we've hired inside Iran. Not necessarily. So are there 17 of them? Maybe. Are they Americans? No. Are they Iranians? Maybe some. Are some of them Jordanians, or some of them Saudis, or some of them Israelis? They could be anything. So I don't see a panic yet, but Mike Pompeo came out and said it's false. The Trump White House came out and said it's false. But we also have to be careful because Iran does have true Americans in detention. And we have to kind of walk an interesting line there because we don't want them hung either. It's like we've got some Americans in detention. We got that doctor, whatever his name is, that pastor, not doctor, in Pakistan. So, I mean, we have Americans out there that we cannot be operating with wild abandon to, their long-term health and survival.
And what happens if all of a sudden American citizens start getting killed, executed in Iran? What move does America make?
Well, I'm not convinced that we necessarily we would not make a military response. That's just a fact. We might make a cyber response, but there won't be a military response. We are not going to go to war with Iran in the conventional sense. We're just not going to happen. And I wish these pundits on TV and those that are even asking the questions that think they're all authorities because they're former State Department or their former defense or their former blah, blah, blahs, that, Trump is being reckless and, he got us out of this. And so we should have, the nuclear deal. So we should have expected Iran's behavior. Well, we were told that Iran was going to behave because of the nuclear deal. And while we were still in the nuclear deal, they were not behaving, including when
Correct.
They seized our sailors. So that's just a load of crap. I mean, there's a lot of things that are conveniently forgotten, but we will not go to conventional war with Iran. But we do have to be careful because Iran can be, as we have seen, they can play tit for tat. They can get really nasty in Syria. They can get very nasty in Yemen. They can get very nasty in Lebanon. They can get very nasty in Iraq. They can get very nasty just about anywhere, including South America.
Correct. And that's something that we really need to remember.
Yeah. So, I mean, any question doesn't ever have a very simple answer. I mean, it kind of comes with the trade deal with China. It's not a simple answer. Quite frankly, I hope we never have a trade deal with China, period. I don't want one. There's a lot out there that's infecting all of that. Oh. It's not a pretty world.
What do you see happening? Okay, what do you see happening with regard to Iran in the next 6 to 8 weeks?
Well, the United States is probably going to put a little bit more pressure on Britain, and the United States is probably going to put a little bit more pressure on some allied countries to shore up the Straits of Hormuz, the Sea of Oman, the Persian Gulf. And whatever we do, we need to tell Europe that and Asia, because most of that cargo, most of that oil and natural gas is not meant for anybody else, but some for Europe, but mostly Asia. Hey, we're happy to do this for you guys, but you need to pony up some money, because we don't need that oil. We don't need that natural gas. We're just doing it for the freedom of transport. The same thing that we're doing in the South China Sea.
Isn't it nice to not have to depend on that oil?
Yep, it sure is. But look at the other issues that it necessarily causes. Because obviously the Brits, you can't rely on them. You got a couple of tankers over there and they send one frigate, and the frigate just wants to get on the radio and say, hey, don't board
the last time, and listen, got a lot of good European friends, but when's the last time the United States could really count on the Europeans?
Well, if we could, it's really too hard to say. It's kind of like,
because we weren't born.
Well, I mean, look, Syria / Lebanon, which are really almost one country in total, that used to be essentially French territory. So it's kind of like, hey, why aren't you handling Syria? Why did it get handed off to Moscow? North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, same thing.
Yep.
Well, where are you?
But all of the American territories seem to be doing okay, right?
We didn't really have any.
Yeah, but we got things that we're protecting, that we're investing in, that we're helping infrastructure and helping security. We've only got 30 seconds, so we're going to have to pick up on this next time. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Drive Time SITREP with Denise Simon. My name's Don Neuen. If you like this show, please tell your family and friends about it. Go to Denise's website, founderscode.com, and I hope that you'll also visit the Cowboy Logic website. You can find that at cowboylogic.us. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back next week. And in the meantime, Denise, you have to take us home.
Thanks for listening. Glad you were with us. God bless America.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.